everybody. Welcome to Life After Death and Beyond. I'm James Van Praagh, and I'm here with my good friend Kellee White. Hello, Kellee.
Hi, James. Hi, everybody.
Happy Memorial Day, which is today.
Happy Memorial Day. And thank you to all the vets out there.
Thank you, everyone who does work for service.
Absolutely.
And Kellee, you're in Texas right now.
I'm in Texas. That's why I have an different background
You've
today.
been traveling a lot.
Been traveling a lot, and tomorrow I'm going to be in Portland.
You're doing
8 Northwest in the morning, which I'm excited about. I'm do that on Wednesday, and then I'm doing the new Renaissance book signing at the new Renaissance store in Portland. So I'm very excited about that.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Great.
And you just came back from Palm Springs.
I was in Palm Springs for a little bit R&R, and it was hot, but it was okay. But a lot of misters. Misters are my friends now, so yeah, just to
good.
change things up, a little bit.
But you got it's not a nice color though. You look like a color.
No? A little color, but we'll see what happens.
Oh my gosh.
So I just want to tell everyone tonight we have a great show. You never know in life when you meet people, but sometimes you meet what's going to happen. But sometimes you meet someone, you feel there's something there with them. And our next guest is I've known Lisa for a long time, and she is a host of really the Shift Network's shows that she does, and she'll tell you more about that. And I met her and I said, we got to do something more with you. So Kellee, would you like to read?
Yes, let me tell you about Lisa. This is Lisa Bonnice. She's an award-winning writer. She's a program host with the Shift Network, and she's a former stand-up comedian. She received 2 excellent awards from MSNBC.com during her tenure there as a news writer and associate producer. She's also traveled the country as a stand-up comic, working with Jeff Foxworthy, Tim Allen, and Steve Harvey. She's hosted numerous summits for the Shift Network, including Ancestral Healing Summit, Beyond the Veil Summit, and Intuitive Medicine Summit. She now excerpts of these interviews you can find now because she does a podcast. But what's really fascinating to me is that she wrote a historical novel called Castlegate, and it's the true and tragic saga of a Scottish family whose dreams of finding their fortunes in the bountiful coal mines of Castlegate, Utah during Prohibition explode in one of the most devastating mine disasters in American history.
Yeah.
Wow. So we have so much to talk about with you. So please welcome Lisa Bonnice.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Lisa.
Welcome.
Hello.
There's so much with you. It's like opening a treasure chest. It's like all these different things.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Right. I knew you were a stand-up comic for a while, and you're very, very funny. And tell us about your path, how you got into writing, and how you're from stand-up comedy. Tell us a little bit more about your background.
Wow. Well, I've been writing for since the turn of the century. It's been a while. That's always been my path. But along the way, as we've talked about, I did stand up for a little while, and then I just sort of realized I don't really like showbiz. There's not a lot of nice people in show business, so I just decided it's not my personality. So I started looking in the other directions and found my way at the Shift Network eventually. It's funny how I came to the Shift Network. I was writing it's a metaphysical comedy, and the protagonist, her name is Lola, and she has this reluctant fairy sidekick who does not want to help this stupid human, but she has to. So Lola, in her journey, she takes a class in shamanic journeying. And I wanted to make sure that I had it right because I knew something about it, but not everything. So I started looking into Sandra Ingerman's work, and I discovered, oh, hey, she's got a class at the Shift Network. And so I was going to take the class, but then I saw, wait, they're hiring. So I ended up, getting hired by the Shift Network, and I've become friends with Sandra, and I've been able to talk to her about the research that I was doing. I've learned so much. And as a result of talking with Sandra, she led me down this path of discovery into this story that's in my family through genealogy research, etc. And then, of course, being part of the Shift Network, I heard people talking about ancestral healing, and the dominoes started falling. The breadcrumb trail was pretty thick, and I just found my way into this remarkable story in my family history that I didn't even know about.
So, Lisa, tell everybody what the Shift Network actually is if they don't know it.
Okay, well, the Shift Network it's basically a transformational learning platform where people like you, James, come. And we teach 7-week classes, and sometimes it turns into an advanced class. But we also offered summits where I was interviewing. Oh, I've done hundreds of summit interviews, interviewing some of the most amazing people on earth. The Shift Network is really just it's a wonderful place to be. There's you pay for some of it's free. It's a great place to be.
And you were the host of my program, my advanced program I did with them, and your buoyancy, your energy was so great that it helped me. And everybody enjoyed that so much. I mean, you just such a wonderful energy. So were you always interested when you were younger in historical things?
I was more interested in psychic development. As a child, I watched shows like The Sixth Sense and the Twilight Zone, but they always made psychic phenomenon scary. And so I was sort of afraid to really look into it, especially the fact that my family of origin were all like, so it wasn't until years later that I started allowing myself. I mean, I knew how it worked. I read plenty of books. I talked to plenty of people. I had plenty of readings, but I never realized that I could do it.
Yeah.
So,
and then how long ago did you realize you can do it? You started doing it.
Well, I guess it was probably in the 90s that I started realizing that I had empathic abilities, that I could feel into what people were, I had this sort of clairsentient thing, but I didn't realize that I had medium abilities. And they're nothing like yours, James. You get all the props, but it was enough to make me realize that, hey, they're really there. I'm not making this up. And that again came as a result of doing this genealogy research and discovering this this story. Because tell us
about that, Lisa, how did you get into doing that, and what did you discover? Tell us, go back to that.
Okay, well, that was where Sandra Ingerman comes in, because she was saying that
for those who don't know who she is, she's a huge.
Yeah, she's one of the most well-known shamanic practitioners, writers. She's a teacher. She's an expert in the field.
Okay.
And so she was telling me the symptoms of a curse. And I thought, wait a minute, I have every one of those. And I didn't believe in curses. I don't care for that word. Yeah. But that's where the ancestral healing comes in, where it's an ancestral pattern. It's a disruption in the field. And so people don't behave as well as they could. And it just gets passed forward and on and on and on. So whether you like the word curse or not, the fact is there's something to this. Yeah. So when she and I talked about this, she referred me to somebody here in Phoenix, and she did a shamanic journey for me and discovered that, oh my gosh, there is this curse. And she said it was about this time in history. And so I looked in my genealogy, in my ancestry tree, which is pretty extensive at the time. And I found that at that time frame, there was an ancestor that was involved in a witch trial, and people were accused, tried, found guilty, and executed, and they cursed this family. And so they were burned at the stake. And then when I discovered years later that some of my ancestors died in this fiery mine explosion, and then my grandmother died as a result of a kitchen fire, her shirt caught fire. My uncle, his house burned down. He was the fire chief as a result of wanting to learn how to deal with fires. So it couldn't be ignored.
Right. No.
Wow, that's some family constellation you've got there.
Wow. So how did you delve into it? What did you discover, the research you did and so forth?
Oh gosh, there's so many parts to it. When I first started getting into this, my first thing to do was to actually travel to Castlegate. The town itself doesn't exist anymore. They've torn it down, and it's in the middle of nowhere, gorgeous area of Utah, Carbon County. And so I went up to the cemetery and visited their graves for the very first time. I didn't know who these people were at all. My daughter and I went up there.
And, these are your ancestors you're talking about? Were these
Yeah,
ancestors of yours from 2 or 3
Yeah.
generations back?
They were, let's see, it was my grandpa's dad.
Okay.
My grandpa. So they came over from Scotland
Okay.
and settled in Castlegate, Utah, where the men all became coal miners.
Okay.
And the 3 of them, my great grandfather, his brother, and their nephew, were all killed in this mine explosion, the Castlegate mine disaster. It was March 8th, 1924. And the only reason I'm even here today is because young men were laid off. There wasn't enough work. So the men who went into the mine that day considered themselves to be lucky because they got this shift. But, you know, it ended up that there was this horrible disaster. So now my grandfather, who was 18 at the time, his mother had just died 6-7 months before that. So now all these kids are orphaned. And I mean, just think of the devastation that would do to an 18-year-old boy. They just come to a brand new country. They really didn't know anybody here. Their mother dies, their father dies. And then, you know, the whole family ended up being scattered to the winds because their little sisters were taken away from them, not out of anything cruel, but because the uncles thought they aren't old enough to handle, you know, raising children. So he lost everything and ended up moving to Michigan and starting a life there. But he was so broken by this that he became a really, I want to say, a bad father. He was detached, he was distant, and he and my mom ended up being estranged. And that's why I didn't know anything about this, because she never talked about him. She never talked about him. And, you know, it messed with her head. She could have been a much better parent. She could have, you know, accomplished more in her life. She had her own damage that, of course, rippled down to me and my kids, etc. So that's where I really started looking into this, is how can I heal this massive rift, if nothing else?
Well, it's massive trauma.
Yeah.
On so many different levels. Out of curiosity, not to interrupt the story, but I'm just thinking of alcoholism with this. Was that a part of this as well?
It was. It absolutely was. And I'm just starting to scratch the surface into how that affected the family. I mean, I know that the Scottish family, they were drinkers. I don't know about my grandfather because, again, I don't know much about him, but I do know that he certainly married some interesting women.
Okay.
And that got passed on to my
Sure.
parents' generation. And now I barely drink at all just because I want nothing to do with, you know, I'm not going there.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So the next step on your journey was
Wow. Okay. Okay. So my daughter and I went to Castlegate to visit this gravesite just to see what does it look like. And my daughter she's a really powerful prayer warrior. She's into it a lot more than I am because, as I said, I didn't really believe I could do any of this stuff. So when we arrived there and we laid flowers on the graves and all that, she started praying because we had realized psychically that many of the men, the cemetery, it's where most of the miners were buried, and the mine is directly underneath it. The cemetery is built on the land right over the mine. So we were standing on top of it. And so my daughter, you know, she started doing all of this praying. And again, this is where it kicked in that I have some kind of abilities, because I began to see this sort of fog rising up from the ground as she prayed and prayed and prayed and went on and on. It was just this, again, this fog of spirit, I guess, lifting and rising up. And we both felt, ooh, there's something amazing going on here. And then she told me later that what she saw was a young Greek man, because there were many Greek miners as well. And he was maybe in his early 20s, and he was dressed all in white. And he walked up to her and he handed her a yellow lily, just like the ones behind me here, and said, "Kind miss." And then he stepped away and disappeared. Wow. So again, you this up. This is just the beginning of the story. It went on and on and on. In fact, if I can jump ahead, another time I went up there to visit, again, visited the graves, cleaned them up, brought some flowers, said hello, and I brought some whiskey with me. And so I toasted them. I drank a little bit of whiskey and I tossed it onto the graves, and then ended up driving back to Phoenix. And when I got home, I pulled out my favorite Oracle deck. It's the Beloved Dead. And this is the card that came up. I don't know if you can see that.
That's the May of a barkeep. Wow.
Yeah, it's a barkeep raising a glass in toast.
Wow, that's amazing. Isn't it amazing?
Yeah.
That was a sign for you to say thank you for remembering us, for honoring us.
Yeah.
Did you feel a connection as soon as you walked that cemetery? You felt, I think the second time you felt it stronger. Do you feel anything?
The first time I was just learning that I was able to do this. So I didn't really feel much when we first arrived, but once she started praying and I saw this fog, that's when I realized, oh, there's something going on here. And then I realized that my great-grandmother, Helen, whose headstone was behind me, she and her husband, Will, were buried side by side. I could feel her so happy because she hadn't allowed herself to cross over. She was staying there because her boys were stuck in between the worlds. And we sort of got this message that many of these miners were trapped because it was this traumatic, horrific event. And many of them thought they were in hell. They were trapped in this fiery, looping moment. So that's why when she was praying, so many of them rose up, and why the young man came forward and thanked her with the flower. Thank you for releasing us. And then Helen, my great-grandmother, was able to, ascend with her boys, who were finally now released.
Wow. Did you have reoccurring dreams about any of this?
I did, but I didn't realize at the time what they were. I had a lot of dreams, but I thought it was about Montana because it's in the same area of the country. It didn't occur to me that Utah would be a place that I would end up someday. Again, I didn't know about this story. So there was that. But then, okay, if we're going to talk about dreams, this is it's part of the story, but it's off to the side. I had dreams for years about a place called Blackpool, England. And I've never heard of it.
Yeah.
Okay. So you know what I'm talking about. I had dreams about this place and I didn't know where it was until I saw a movie on BBC America called Blackpool. And I was like, oh, that's the place. So I ended up saving for years and years and years. I've got to get to Blackpool. I don't know why, and then once we got there, my husband and I, we realized it was more about getting me across the pond, because then we ended up traveling up to Scotland. And that's where I visited the site of, so many of my ancestors, where they were born, where they died, where they lived, that way I was able, when I was writing Castlegate, I was able to write genuinely and authentically about what Scotland looks like, what it felt like at the time. And while I was there, I had so much interaction with Helen. In fact, I got very sick while I was there. I was fine when we were in England, where the Blackpool Tower acted as this antenna. But as soon as we got to Scotland, I got very sick. And I didn't know, what do you do here? I mean, if I was in the States, I'd go to my own doctor. But what do you do when you're in a foreign country? What's their insurance like? And where do you go? What do you do? And I was just sort of laying there afraid, terrified. What's going to happen to me? And I heard Helen saying to me, this is what it was like back then. You never knew if you were going to live or die. Wow. You never knew.
Wow.
So, so then we went and visited her little brother's memorial. He was killed in World War I. We visited the memorial in their hometown with his name on it. And long story short, when I got back home, I was still very sick and I had a sinus headache by this time. And I was laying on the couch just, and I felt on this side of my face this weird sort of tingling pressure growing and growing and growing. And again, I was afraid, but I didn't know what to do about it. And then I felt like this side of my face just disappeared.
Wow.
And I heard, this is what happened to Buchan when he was in World War I. He was over in France and he was killed because he was shot in the face.
Oh, wow.
Oh my gosh.
And then part of my work with Shift, I was working with some medical intuitives, And one of them was giving me a reading, and I was telling her, over the course of my life, I've had so many injuries to my face. I've been in car accidents where I've had my nose broken, and I've had my teeth broken, and it's always right here. And I told her, I don't know what this is about. She's like, well, and I didn't tell her any of the story. She said, I see that you were a soldier in World War I and you were shot in the face.
Oh, jeez.
Oh my gosh. So that was you then.
Apparently, I cannot say for sure, as you know, but I have a story about Buchan. Get this. Because of Ancestry.com and my passionate genealogy research, I discovered so much about Buchan and his life. I know everything that's available to know about this young man. So because I had this information on Ancestry, I was contacted by somebody who I didn't know, saying, we have something that we think might belong to your family. How do you know Buchan Littlejohn? So I told her what I knew, and she said, well, I live in Washington State. We found something in our backyard when we moved here 50 years ago. We were building our house. We dug, we were digging, and we found this thing in our yard. How do you suppose this could have come, to Tacoma, Washington? So I got back on Ancestry, and I dug and I dug and I dug and I dug and I dug, and I discovered that my great-grandmother, Helen, when she moved to Utah from Scotland, she would have brought this with her. When she died, it apparently went to her older brother, who was head of the family. And when he died, his daughter ended up with it. She moved to Tacoma, Washington. That was her land. So what she sent me was this. This is Buchan Littlejohn's, they called it a dead man's penny. It was a memorial plaque given to families of men who were killed in the war.
Wow.
So when I received this, it says, you can't really see it very well. It says Buchan Littlejohn right here. It's raised letters. And the first time I got it, I ran my fingers along the letters, and I can feel it right now. Helen must have done this so many times. She raised Buchan. Their parents died, so she raised him. So she was his second mother. So whenever she would rub her fingers across the name, she felt like she was contacting him, touching him. And I can feel that when I rub my finger along his name.
Wow.
It's, I get goosebumps. The ripples are so powerful.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Were you receiving messages all along from the other side guiding you on this journey?
I didn't realize that that's what it was, but yes, because, synchronicities, that's how I took it. What an interesting coincidence this is. So, eventually I realized, I can't pretend that this isn't real anymore. And and I've developed this wonderful relationship with Helen and Will, her husband, Will. And then Helen's brother, Jordy, is another one who came through loud and clear. In fact, I've got so many stories to tell. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but this is one of my favorite stories. I went back last August, to do a book signing. And I went again to the cemetery and the mine entrance. And I was saying my farewells because I don't know if I'll ever be back. It felt like my work might be done. So I wanted to say goodbye. And so, it was really very touching. And I brought some tuppences. They're 2-penny coins from Scotland. I had brought a whole bunch of them home with me, and I sprinkled them in gold dust, and I carried them up there in this little bag. And so I brought one for all 4 of the men, and 3 of the men and my grandmother. So I put a tuppence on each grave, and then again I toasted them with whiskey, and I was, thank you so much for being a part of my life. Let's not let this be the end. That whole thing. And I heard Helen and Will, again, buried side by side, take some of these flowers. And this is an old, middle of nowhere cemetery. It's overgrown with weeds, and it's not well tended, but it's still beautiful. So anyway, I saw these weeds. They were like 2-3 feet high, and they had these little yellow flowers on them. And I was like, all right, I'll take some weeds with me. So I picked a couple, and they're like, that's enough. 2 is enough. And then I left, and I left out part of the story. A few months before this, I had been diagnosed with COPD. lung issues. And that just didn't feel right. It just didn't feel like that. But it came to me that after the mine explosion, the air in Castlegate was filled with toxic coal dust. Nobody could breathe for days. And the men, there were 2 explosions. The first explosion killed a certain amount of men, but then the mine was filled with coal dust. So the men who were there still alive would have either suffocated immediately on this poisonous coal dust, or they were killed when the second explosion happened. So that's what I was thinking. Okay, maybe that's what the lung issue is. But I digress. When I got here's the little flower. When I got back to my little Airbnb, I looked it up, and it's called gumweed, and gumweed is used for lungs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
so they were trying to help you.
Yeah, so I've started using the tincture made of this stuff, and boom, it was amazing, just amazing.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Unbelievable story.
Just for honoring those, for honoring them. I mean, really, they just think of all the appreciation they have for you honoring their stories and for having them be heard, because, they left without being heard or people knowing their stories, and you honored them by bringing their stories out and living again. How wonderful is that?
And also helping the trauma that would have gone forward.
Yes.
I mean, what an agreement that you would have made on the other side before you incarnated. Really, bravo, because it's a big one.
It really
it's a big story. It's a large story.
Yeah. And that's just my own personal sphere of influence. But when I went a year ago to the documentary premiere, again on March 8th, 2024, 100 years to the day, after the documentary, they asked me and the other people who were in the movie to come up on stage and to say a few words, etc. And when it was my turn to speak, I said, this is a line from the book, that you don't really die until someone says your name for the last time. And
wow,
I can feel them. It's not just my ancestors, all of the miners that we were all there to honor. And this was a sold out crowd because everybody who lives there is related to somebody. So, I mean, the place was just, I can feel them in the room now. It was packed with all of these miners and their wives and their children and all these people who are so grateful that they haven't been forgotten. And I think that the ripple effect for that, again, it's not just my family. It's this whole horrible event that's had some healing.
Yeah, you released a lot of trauma.
And Lisa, where do you go from here?
Well, from here, as far as Castlegate goes,
get you a sense of like, I got to do explore something else here, or
yes, I am. Well, first we're making an audio book of Castlegate, which I'm hoping will be out in the fall. But I'm also working on a book to follow up about the witch trial.
Oh, great!
So, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah,
that was. It happened in the Glasgow area. And it was this nobleman who he fell ill, mysteriously ill. The doctors couldn't fix him, and he wasn't getting any better. And eventually, an itinerant servant girl came forward and said, "There are some people in town who, have cast a spell on him." So she brought some of his men to this house. And when they went inside, this little girl walked up to the fireplace, the hearth, reached between some stones and pulled out a wax doll with pins in it.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. So then when they took the doll to his home where he was unconscious, when they took the pins out, within a couple of days, he was improving. So the woman whose house this was, she was arrested. And as he was on the mend, she was in custody awaiting trial, and then his health went right back down again. And this little girl came forward again and said, "There's another one of these dolls." And so they went to the house of the son of this woman and found another doll. And then her 14-year-old daughter, they were all arrested. The little girl, the daughter confessed. I'm going to assume she was sort of, maybe not tortured, but they kept them awake for long periods of time. They terrified her. So she eventually confessed that she and her brother and 2 other women, I believe one of them was maybe her grandmother, and then another one was maybe a neighbor. So all of these people were arrested, taken to trial, immediately found guilty, and again, executed and burned at the stake. And this is part of when I went to Scotland, I went to the site of the executions because it's sort of it's a little park, I guess, for lack of a better word. It's a clearing where I don't think anybody wanted to build on it. But I went there, and again, I did some prayers, and now I'd learned from my daughter how to do this. Exactly. And I used some holy water and did what I could to, make some apologies for what my ancestors had done. And in the meantime, I'm writing that book. I'm writing that story. Again, not just because I'm a writer and I love to tell a story, but because I want people to see what ancestral trauma over the years is doing to all of us. Right. These are really dramatic, extreme stories, but we all have something. Yeah. We all have some kind of horrible thing that happened to one of our ancestors. And I'm convinced that that's part of what's going on in the world right now.
100%. I work with generational trauma, and really what you're saying, you're giving an accurate story of what happens to, they consider it 13 generations behind and 13 going forward unless somebody steps in. So you're the one that stepped in. And I love the lens that you're using, because you can look at your genealogy, you can look at your history. Usually in family constellation therapy, they go back 3 generations, sometimes 4. But in this case, you would have gone back and back and back, and you can uncover some fascinating things. I have to tell you, what really is just blowing me away is your fearlessness.
Yeah.
You are fearless.
Yeah.
That would have made me a little, I don't know, intimidated, I think.
Well, maybe that's how my lack of belief that this is true was helpful. I was too dumb to be afraid.
Maybe.
Yeah. Because I didn't really realize that. I thought, I'm doing it. I'm doing what I'm led to do. So this is what's happening. But I did, since you bring it up, after I came home from the trip where I visited the execution site, I ended up needing to get a soul retrieval, because apparently while I was there at the execution site, even though I was just addressing my people, there'd been so many people killed there, so many executions that I didn't even know about, that apparently someone glommed onto me. Ooh, fresh meat, let's follow her home. So I had to have that attachment removed. And so, yeah, there is something to be said for a little fear,
Well, there are certain things that I just wouldn't want to go near. And a lot of that's this.
Yeah. Lisa, a quick question here. First of all, a couple of things I wrote down. So Glasgow would be the area, Glasgow, Scotland. Okay. And anything in your personal family right now about fires? And did that continue on, or is that finished and done with?
That, I believe, is finished and done. I'm still very careful. I never leave a candle. Like, I always have a 7-day candle burning on my ancestral altar. But if I leave the house or go to bed, I always blow it out, just because, I'm not going to leave this open. Sure. But it seems to have sort of, over the generations, like I said, my grandmother, this was my mom's mom. She died as a result of a fire. My mom's brother ended up being the fire chief because his house kept catching on fire. And then in my mom's later years, she ended up with lung cancer. So her lungs were burnt up from the inside. And then the doctors decided they wanted to do radiation on her brain to prevent this cancer from spreading there. So they did radiation on her brain, and the doctors aren't going to admit this, but I'm convinced that they fried it a little bit, because she was never the same. So she's got this burned up brain or burned up lungs. And now I'm dealing with debilitating hot flashes. So it's still affecting us, but it's watered down just a little bit every generation.
Well, and lungs represent grief. These families would have had huge grief.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. So you're working right now on the story now about the burning. Is that what you're doing now? Okay.
Yeah. I'm about halfway done with that book. It's taken a little longer because I have learned to be respectful of the story. Sure. So I only write when I feel, I don't write when I'm not feeling protected. I don't want any of that stuff entering my life, because I've learned as a writer, and I'm sure other writers out there will tell you, when you're writing something, especially fiction, that stuff starts happening in your real life.
Yeah, you gotta be careful.
So I'm being very respectful, and I'm making very sure that I'm telling the story reasonably and not pointing blame at anybody. It is what it is. This is what happened. And
you're just relaying history, really. You're relaying their story, what happened, as best as you know it. And I sometimes I'm writing, well, many times I'll feel them come through me writing. And I'm sure with you, with your writing, you felt them come through and write their story.
Yeah. This reminds me of another story. I don't think I told this one yet. When I first began, because I had all of this genealogy research, I knew everybody's birth dates. And so I ran astrology reports for the main characters. And many of them I had to just sort of guess what time it was, but then I ended up finding their times of birth. But for Helen, again, my great-grandmother, I got her birth date off of her headstone, because I hadn't found her birth certificate yet, her birth document. So when I went to write a passage where Helen was the main character in the scene, I wanted to know, okay, how would she have reacted to this? So I start reading her report, and I kept hearing this voice saying, this is wrong. This is wrong.
Wow.
This is wrong. This is wrong. I mean, it became so adamant, I couldn't even read it any longer. So I went to my computer, and by this time I had found the Scotland's People website where it said, her birth date and her time of birth. And her birthday was wrong on the death certificate.
Wow.
It was off by a year and a month.
Oh, that's a totally different personality.
Absolutely. A completely different personality. So yes, she absolutely reached across and was like, dude, this is wrong.
Wow, so fascinating. And will this be made into a movie as well, do you think, or documentary?
I would love for it to become a movie. That is in the hands of the ancestors. But again, this documentary, it was called Remembering Castlegate. Beautiful, beautiful story. It's like a 20-minute long documentary, and it tells, the town's history, but then it focuses on the explosion itself. And it's actually, there's a museum there in Helper, Utah. That's the closest town that still exists. And in their museum, they have a little room where you can go in and sit, and it's playing on a loop. So, so anytime you walk into the Helper Museum, there's my face.
Wow.
Kind of cool. Yeah.
Wow. And briefly tell us a little bit about the fairy novels that you're writing.
Oh, yeah, please.
Yeah, well, those were written for fun. Again, I wrote the very first one just after the turn of the century, and have republished it recently. The name is A Fairy on My Shoulder, and this is about a woman named Lola who is ordinary. She's very ordinary. She lives a boring life. She's just bored to her teeth, and she makes a wish. I wish life was more interesting. And at the same time, there's a bad witch across the street who's casting a spell. And so she gets sucked into this and wakes up with uncontrollable, unexplainable psychic abilities. So she doesn't know how to use them. She, sort of prays, she begs the gods, help me with this. And so she is assigned this fairy, and the fairy doesn't want to be there. She doesn't like human beings, and Lola can't pronounce her name correctly, which makes her even madder. Lola calls her Twink, which is so insulting. So they have this, sort of clashing relationship. So yes, the first The first book is about her having to sort of battle against what this woman across the street is doing. And then the second book is, again, where she takes a class in shamanic healing and becomes friends with a trans woman, and they become girl detectives together. And so they go out and solve mysteries, etc.
The first one, The Fairy on My Shoulder, I assume she works with fairy. The fairy helps her in the book to get insights and in psychic work. Yeah.
Yes.
Have that awareness. And the second one, which is hysterical, the fairy fell off my shoulder.
Yeah.
And is that character, the fairy, going to continue for the third book, maybe?
Yes, absolutely. It will continue as long as ideas come pouring into my head. There's a third book.
Something with animation, a cartoon about the fairy, and I think that'd be a great one to do an animation series, because that character is so great.
Yeah.
It's really good. Wow.
So, your mouth to God's ears.
No, we're just putting it out there to the universe. Wow. And any more new books coming your way, or anything you work on now?
Well, you know what? I think that's actually plenty, and my plate is very full. I'm super excited about the audiobook of Castlegate coming out, though, because it's written in plain old narrative style, but when the characters are speaking, they're speaking in Scots dialect, and I cannot do a Scottish accent. I couldn't do it to save my life.
No, of course you can. Are you going to bring some people in, or to do that, or are you going to try to do it? Yeah.
No, I found somebody who's perfect for it. There's this, she's a Scottish comedian named Eleanor Morton, and she's TikTok and YouTube viral for doing this character called Craig the Tour Guide. And she does amazing accents. And it just occurred to me a few weeks ago, you know what? Why don't you just hire Eleanor Morton? She's a comedian. I used to be a comedian. We've got all these things in common. So I just tracked down her contact information, and we've worked it out, and she's going to be working on it this summer, and I'm hoping to have it out by fall.
Oh, that's great, Lisa. Yeah. Really, really great. Wow. You keep them very, very busy. Wow. Wow. And I'm going to go look up the Castle Rock, Utah, and the whole mining.
Right, James? It's fascinating.
Fascinating. I wouldn't be surprised if you continue doing something historically with your family, or other parts of the family, if things happen, because it's such great work, and it's such great healing as well for those generations and traumas. Wow.
Yeah. Well, there's another story in a different branch of my family. This is my dad's side of the family. His mother's brother was a famous hangman. In fact, he was mentioned in the book True Grit. He was the hangman in the town where all of this happened, and he was known as I don't remember exactly what they called him, but he was an expert at putting the noose where it killed them immediately. There was no suffering. He was a compassionate executioner. So
great title. Great title.
Yeah. So who knows what kind of stuff is passed down through the generations for that, and things again that I don't even know about. There are so many stories out there, people whose names I don't even know.
Wow.
That's incredible. Really, really incredible. Wow.
Yeah.
And you have one daughter? Is that all your children you have?
I have two. I have two daughters. Yeah.
And are they both interested in psychic phenomena, or no?
Actually, yes. One of them, the one that went to Castlegate with me for the first time, she's she's more of a prayer warrior. She's more Jesus centric. So she's very, very centered in that. My other daughter is a psychic medium, where she actually worked in a metaphysical bookstore doing readings. So apparently this runs in the family.
Yeah, I would say so.
I would think so.
Wow. Yeah. Would you ever think about doing rescues at people's houses, or they invite you to certain places they feel are haunted, or the energy's off, and they go in there and do some rescue work? Have you thought about that?
I don't know if I would want to do that professionally. I mean, I can do it. I've done it in my own homes.
Right.
But to do it for somebody, for a stranger, for pay, I'm not sure that's my path.
Very fascinating, really, with the work you do. Honestly, really great. How can people get to you, Lisa, on your website?
Well, I've got two that you can go to. One is lisabonnice.com, and that's about me and all of my stuff. But
Okay.
for the book, it's castlegatebook.com.
Okay, castlegatebook.com. Fantastic.
Wow.
Well, thank
Really
you
interesting.
so much.
Yep.
Really, Lisa, incredible.
Wow. Wow. It's such a great story. And James, tell us, what do you have coming up?
I did. I put up for some private readings of that private group demonstrations in May, and it filled up so quick. It's only 10 people. So would you give me June the 13th? Is next. There it is, June 13th. If you want to register for that, they can. That just went up today. So if you go to the May event, it'll say sold out, but it'll bring you to June 13th. And that it's only 10 people, and it's a 3-hour type of situation.
Great. And then you have a big event in Maui coming up.
Oh, in July, I have Maui group. Yes, healing the mind, body, and spirit. And that's coming up in July. We still have a couple of 2 or 3 spaces open for that. So it'll be fantastic. Middle of July. There it is. Yeah. July 9th, 13th.
Good.
And what do you have, Kelly? You
I also, it's been such a busy time. I also have in June 20th to the 23rd, I have a big event, Roots of Healing. In fact, we will be covering generational trauma.
There you go, Lisa.
We'll be covering that along with talking about a lot of deep spiritual topics that we're going to be going through. But generational trauma is a big one, I think. So join us if you're in Los Angeles area, June 20th to 23rd. Please join us. Me and Dr. Shirley Impellizzeri and Carrie Gonia.
And then
and then I have a signing in Portland on May 28th, which I'm really excited about.
Well, fantastic. Well, great. Well, thank you, Lisa, very, very much. Appreciate
you,
Lisa. Being here. And
thank you for having me.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time. Okay.